Hello, good
Hello.
evening, Mr. Lush.
What's going on?
Not much. How are you?
I'm good, bro.
Hey, thanks for taking the time to
I'm good.
chat.
Yeah. I mean, you hit me up, and the timing was right. So,
Okay,
timing is everything in this world, you know.
it is, and I'm just going to tell my listeners. I've reached out to a few artists, and it's always, can you do it now? Can you do it now? And silly me, I'm reaching out while I'm on the road, and it's like, as much as I'd love to do it now, I can't. I don't have my recording gear, and that just happened. And I made sure that I came back home and to have this conversation with you because I know you're a busy guy. So, thank you.
Uh, no worries. Thank you.
With that, I have to admit I am slightly unprepared. Typically, when it comes to these, I will write a list of questions. I'll send them to the artist yourself and make sure you're okay with what I'm going to ask you. But there's no gotcha questions, so I can wing it somewhat. And if I ask anything that you don't feel like answering, you just tell me, okay?
Sounds fair to me.
All right.
That's cool.
I'll start off with something quirky. Who's your favorite pop group? If you had to pick a pop group, like is it Backstreet Boys, Spice Girls, the Monkees?
Would you consider Phil Collins to be pop? Because that's my answer.
Okay, I'll give you. Here's the thing. I was. It's funny you asked that. I was listening to Q107 this morning on my way out, and a song that to me was pop. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I think it was Gabriel started singing. I'm like, oh, it's. I think it's Genesis, but they're definitely a different sound than your typical rock, right?
I mean, yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a Genesis. I'm a Genesis and Phil Collins fan. I tell anyone you ask. So
I
that's
heard.
my yeah. If I'm chill, I mean, yeah, we're picking pop groups. Yeah, I mean, shit, man, fuck, I don't know. At this point, Drake is pop, you know. So I like Drake. How about that? My
Okay.
favorite pop group, you
Okay.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, and Drake to me is a bit more pop than Phil Collins would be. But going back to Phil
Hey,
Collins,
man. Yeah.
I did hear that there's a chance of a reunion. Would you want to go to see that if Genesis got back
Nah,
together?
fuck that. He's got enough money. He doesn't need my $200-300 for a ticket at the ACT. It's all right. I'll watch him on YouTube. Fuck that. Nah, I'm not a concert guy. You know, I'm not a concert guy. I find I'm generally disappointed when especially rappers, they're the worst. You know, you go see the rapper that you love and you see him live, and you're like, this guy's fucking trash live. So yeah, nah, it's all right. He's good. He doesn't need my money.
Well,
I'll
one thing I
I'll watch it on YouTube.
one thing I could say about rappers seen live, it's somewhat the, the there's something to be said about a stage being filled by entertainers, and when you have a band, you have five guys, sometimes seven, eight guys up on a stage that can fill the space very well. When you have a DJ with a rapper and maybe a hype guy, it's so empty up there. The symmetry, if you will, just looks awkward to begin with, and I agree with you. It's typically they're not the best live either. They have a lot of click tracks or backtrack going on, and they can't even keep up with their own flow, like they're breathing and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why most guys are crap. There's a few that are legitimately amazing live, but most of them are shit. So you know what? I'll keep my money in my pocket and I'll listen to the fucking song on Spotify and get a better experience.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Let me ask you then, what was the last song you were listening to before you spoke to me?
Well, I'm going to DJ in a couple hours, so I was actually just updating my USBs with like all the new music I got this week. So it's just basically everything that I just got in the last sort of like 48 hours that I was just putting on my USBs. So I mean, there's a bunch of new Metalhead stuff that I just got this week. Blocks and Escher, Fade EP on Metalheads. I just got the new V stuff this morning from Brian. This new Command Strange I just listening to, and yeah, that's basically it. Just updating my USBs with everything I just got in the last couple hours, so last couple days. So a bunch of new Metalheads stuff that's forthcoming, a bunch of new V stuff that's forthcoming. Yeah, that's it.
Well, and that's kind of
That's the
interesting.
last. Yeah. That's be the last. I was literally just listening to that right before you called because I was updating my USB. So yeah, there's a new Fade EP on Metalhead that's disgusting. Oh yeah, the new Survey and Quartz EP. They just started their own label and they got three hot tracks on that and Kid Drama music. So it's all brand new drum and bass, man. Stuff that's not even out yet. That's what I
Well,
was listening to.
and that's what I want to ask you then. So these are songs that aren't out yet. You obviously have direct contact with these artists, and they're giving you these songs to play out on their behalf. Is that what's happened?
Well, some are those particular ones. Those are just promos that the label sent me. So yeah, I get that the label in that case, but it depends on the artist. Certain guys send me direct, but and others the label sends me, and then other shit, man. I just will buy my music, man. I'm never, I know some DJs that they only play what they get sent or whatever. That's not me, man. I record shop every week.
You know what? I think, and I want to step back for a sec because I do know what you're talking about with promo CDs and how you're getting them, but I don't think everybody understands that process, and I don't think every DJ is privileged to that knowledge. And one of the things I think that separates you and a few others are your connections, your networking abilities, and how you get your hands on this type of material. So, what would you say to a DJ who wanted to get his hands on material before it's released? What do you do?
Well, back in the day, you got out and you literally hit the bricks and you shook hands and made people aware of you. But you do that in a sense now, but you basically, I mean, for me, it's a lot of just sort of long-standing relationships, labels that have been, a lot of these labels have been getting their music for years, or in some cases, a lot of labels I've had to reconnect with recently, to get back on the mailing list. And you just, how would a new DJ do that? I mean, a new DJ would do that by proving that they have an audience. So a new DJ would do that by, I guess, at this point in time, proving that if you have a radio show or something, like online or whatever, like if you have a lot of online, I guess at this point you can quantify someone's reach by their online presence, I suppose. Like the Facebook likes or SoundCloud plays or whatever. I suppose if I was a new unknown DJ, I guess I would kind of use that and be like, hey, I'm so and so from this city, and this is where I play every week, and you kind of have to. You have to sell yourself. I mean, now a lot of the promos, it's promo lists. There's a lot of just sort of like promo companies that send multiple labels at a time. So you don't have to go directly to each label. You can, I get a lot of stuff from the PR companies. Again, they sort of have to just apply, kind of. So, I mean, if you're a new guy, really just say, you know what, man, just get as popping as you can. But at the same time, don't worry so much about getting all the new music. There's so much music out there that's, released every week, and you got 25 years of drum and bass to pull from. Like, be a selector, you know what I mean? And then that's how you get yourself popping, by being a DJ that stands out in the first place. And then people that will notice that, and then they're going to want to get their music to you. So rather than you chasing them, they're going to chase you.
Yes, man, that's great advice. Okay,
it's a long process. It's like, that's not a flick the switch overnight thing. That's years and years of work to get to that point. I think a lot of the new guys, I don't know if they have that. I don't know if they have that set of balls, man. I don't know. It remains to be seen. That's what it boils down to.
I think that people, as metaphorically speaking, people at the gym who've been going to the gym for many years see newcomers to the gym and have that same type of outlook. Like, how do I get as big as you? Well, you put in the work, and we'll see how much.
Yeah.
You got your guys who last half a year versus your guys who actually you see 2-3 years after. And after a year of going to the gym, you'll notice those people who've been going for 4 or 5 years. At that point, that's when they start to help you. For that first year, they just let you do your thing because they don't think you're going to last. But once they see that you're starting to last, that's when. And it's the same thing with you guys who are, to me, are the pioneers in this scene. When people first enter the scene, you guys don't really invest much, but once you guys see that the people are still there after 3 or 4 years, you guys start doing their parties. You start, entertaining their questions like these ones tonight. Rather than same thing I would say as advice I would give is record stores. Like, I used to pick up promo CDs from distributors through record stores, but they didn't give them to me because I was asking for them. They gave them to me because I had a radio show. So a platform, like you mentioned, is very important. Like, why am I giving you my music?
Yeah, exactly. And what you said is 100% true. For me, especially, I'm actually the worst of that. It takes a while to get in my door, because I'm very wary of people and their intentions, because I've seen a lot of people come and go over the years, and a lot of people that I've seen come and go are people that when they were there, in the back of my mind, I was like, this guy's not serious, man. He doesn't really live this like we do. And 99% of the time, I was right, man. They're here today, gone tomorrow. Even if not here today, gone tomorrow with a 5-year run, they're here today, gone tomorrow, because they don't really, they didn't get what they wanted out of it, so they left it. It wasn't the most important thing in their life. You know what I'm saying? So I agree with you, 100%, 100%.
Well, okay, and that kind of leads into a question I was going to ask later, but I'll bring it up now. You being a part of half of the Catch and Wreck crew, and infamously El Natural not being around anymore, can you talk about how you guys first met and how the Catch and Wreck thing was born?
Well, how we met was just through being in the same places all the time, to the point where there was no other choice but to meet. Like basically in the in the jungle days, like the hardcore into the jungle days, like 93, 94, 95, I guess. I was out every single weekend raving. I was in the record store every week buying records, and I was out every week raving. And then myself and my friends, we had our crew, and then we'd always see, you start to see all the same people. So Natural was there with his boys. He had his crew, and then there was also like all the Heart Lake guys. They had their sort of crew, and our three sort of crews were kind of like the three of people sort of our age, because you got to remember, like, the guys that were there, like, the Dr. Noahs, the Medicine Muffins, the Jungle PSCs, the Roughnecks, Marcus, Mystical Sniper, they're all older than us, right? So we were like the kids that were sort of just raving to those guys and hanging around those guys. So just through being like, basically, there was a club called Tunnel in '94, which was basically run by Cyrus. That was like sort of so like on a Saturday night, if you had like a big ass rave, it's not as intimate. You don't really get to rub shoulders with people. But at Tunnel every week, and in the rec store every week, that's where I basically met everybody that I forged relationships with, back then, and some are lasting to now. So where I met Natural was just through being at all those raves, but mainly through the Tunnel Club. Just my crew, his crew, and like the Heart Lake boys. We were sort of like the three sort of big groups of guys our age that were like really passionately into jungle, that were around there. And then there was all, Everfresh and Slip and Slide, and those guys as well were there. But so that's how I met him. I couldn't really pinpoint like a day dot of, I could say this is when I met him, but it's from that era, that sort of '94 jungle era, where we were all in Tunnel every Friday. And that's where I met him. And then he used to, on nights where there wasn't raves, we would throw house parties. My boy would throw house parties, and then it got to the point where him and all his boys would come to our house parties. And so we just, over time, we just built up a friendship, and that's where I met him. So the early '90s. Yeah.
And okay, let me try and take us through it, because when I first heard of DJ Lush and MCL Natural, they were two separate entities. You guys did a lot of work together, but it wasn't until around the early 2000s, I believe, that the Catching Wreck was born, and you guys started putting out music under that name. Is that true?
Yeah, it's probably more like '98, '99, but yeah, that's true. I mean, what it was basically, like, we were friends, obviously, and what it was he kind of stepped back from the scene around '96, '97, for a variety of reasons. One of them being he didn't like the direction of the music at that time, because you can remember it was like, talking like Super Sharpshooter and all that, with like a lot of the corny hip hop samples. He wasn't really feeling that, so he kind of took a step back. Anyway, so to make a long story short, I sort of reconnected with him around the end of '97, because there was a rave that I was throwing and I wanted to book him, and he turned down the booking, but we stayed in touch, and we ended up becoming much closer friends, and he ended up just like coming to check me all the time, and we would do mixtapes. Like, I would DJ and he would MC, but it was mainly just, I was kind of showing him that, like, he'd missed about 2 years of work of the music, so I was kind of getting him back up to speed and showing him all the stuff he missed, and showing him all the new music that was coming out, weekly at that point, and he was getting excited about being involved again. And then he started coming out with me to like Beat Junkie and stuff like that, and pretty much as soon as he kind of started showing his face again, it was like bang, 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 bang. Right away he started, Cyrus right away was booking him again, and then he started touring with Mystical and Sniper, like, outside it, because those guys were they were signed to a big agency in the States at the time, so they were all Mystical and Sniper's gigs, like in LA and all across the state. He was there touring MC. That was pretty much like instant. But anyway, while that was happening, so the reason why you're saying is it seemed like we were separate is because he was like right away, like, you know, the main resident MC for Cyrus, and he was MCing for Mystical and Sniper, but we were doing our thing together as just boys, basically. And so I can't remember exactly when we decided to start using that name, but it was pretty early on, like from when we were making mixtapes, like just in my basement, that we kind of forged that partnership. And then when around 99, we decided that, because we had people around us that, you know, like Slip and Slide, Slip, and Dave Whalen and stuff that were making beats, and we were hanging out with those guys, and we got to the point where we were like, you know what, we need to get our own studio. So we pooled our money together, and we got a E64, like a E64 sampler, and a computer and stuff, and I guess that was really, the formal setting up of our partnership, I guess, because we were actually, you know, technically partners on a studio. So that would be, your timeline. It was 99 and we got the sampler, so yeah, 2000 makes sense as far as when you'd start seeing us in the raves, you know, officially playing together. So that makes sense.
Well, okay, and then the production stuff. When did you guys start releasing music together?
Well, we got the sampler in 99 and we started, you know, trying to learn it. And I guess the first thing that came out would have been, I think it was Hudson Beats. So that was what, like 2001?
Yeah.
You know, I got really good memory on some things, and other things are just a complete blur. I gotta be honest with you.
I get you, man.
I think the first release was Hudson Beats. Pretty sure it was Hudson Beats. It was funny. We were supposed to do something for Vial Syndicate, and that didn't work out. And then it ended up being Hudson Beats, and then shortly thereafter, we got signed to Trouble on Vinyl because I had met Clayton in Miami, and we forged a friendship, and then we stayed in contact. And then she ended up taking some of our early stuff that we had done with my boy Jester, who works closely with Gremlins right now. The three of us have done a bunch of stuff together, and he ended up taking it, and then National I ended up getting signed to Trouble on Vinyl. So it all kind of happened 2001, 2002. If I think back, that's when that all kind of went down. But pretty sure the first release was Bonanza on Hustle Beats.
Bonanza, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I cringe when I listen to that too.
Oh, why? Come on, man.
It's horrible. It's fucking awful. But anyway, it was cool at that time. But oh fuck, I hate that tune, man.
You know,
at the time, don't get me wrong. At the time, I thought it was awesome. But I listened back to that shit and I just cringe. But anyway, I'm sure we all have that, right?
I was gonna say, I was just talking to Capital J actually, and he was saying he has a problem that there's one song that everywhere he goes, people always ask, like, hey, do you play this? Can you play this? And if he says no, they'll pull it up on YouTube, like, oh, I can get it. And he's like, no, don't. Oh, and he's like, man, I was like 17.
Who's that?
Jay, Capital J.
Oh, Jay. Yeah. I'm sure Jay's got a lot of those ones as well, man. All of us do, man. Everybody does. Not like, you know, if I look back, if I'm totally honest, man, if I look back, a lot of our music that came out in the very early days had no business coming out. It wasn't ready, but for whatever reason, people decided to put it out. You know, we were young, we were, you know, eager. So yeah, there's some abomination floating around on vinyl.
I think that's unfair, man. We all loved it, and I still do. It's the music that turned me on to drum and bass to begin with. So it's primitive, yes, but the nostalgia of it is what I love, and I can appreciate as an artist when you see something that you did in your younger years. It seems so, you know, sophomoric in a way, and you want to see the established part of your career being presented, not the early adolescent years, let's say.
You know, the only issue with those tunes, all of our old shit, the only issue with it was never the vibe of it. If I listen to it now, I'm like, that was a really good idea we had. That was a good, you know, it was a good rhythm. It was a good song essentially, but it was just the execution, the production was horrible. That's why I cringed. We've never made anything that I don't like stylistically because we made it. Obviously, it comes from our taste, but it's just the execution was just fucking off. The production's horrible. That's all it is. That's why I cringe at it.
But I think your tools have probably improved over the years too, right? It's not fair to say it was also your abilities. It was also what you were working with at the time. Is that right?
Well, no, because we had the same sampler that Dillinger had. We had the same sampler that Optical had. You know what I mean? So it was our abilities, dude. If I'm totally honest with you, you
Okay.
know, we were using the same gear, essentially. Well, not all the same gear, but yeah, it was a combination of. I guess it's a combination of both, I suppose. But really, it was just, you know, we were never like technical people, especially me. I mean, Natural was the backbone of any type of technical operation we had. He was the backbone. You know, we were not technical guys. We were just vibes guys. We were ideas guys. You know, so yeah, it's a combination of technical know-how and the equipment for sure.
You know what? You just kind of touched down on something you had said to me years ago. I had complimented you on a song that you had made, and you corrected me and said that you didn't make it, that Natural made it, and that I should go talk to him about it. And I want to talk when it came to the music that you guys were making. When did you stop making music together?
Stop making music together.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you think of the last song, like what the last song the two of you did together was?
no, because it probably didn't come out. We have way more music that never came out than what did come out. Well, basically, what it was like he was always like he took to it. Like when we got the sampler and you know it came very much a lot easier. I struggled with it always. The technical, like even just using the equipment, I couldn't get my head around it. You know what I mean? So I'd be like, yeah, the bass line should be like this, or let's use this sample, or the arrangement should be like this. But he was definitely the engineer, and he was also exceptional creative guy. Like you know, so he as much music as we made together, he made on his own because the studio was always at his place. You know what I mean? So he was, you know, so if we worked in the studio for 8 hours, he'd do another. You know, he made a lot of music by himself. He never, to be honest, he didn't need my help at all. You know, he's a very talented guy with that. So when did we stop making music together? I don't know, probably 2005, 6-ish, I suppose. I couldn't really pinpoint like this is the day we stopped making music, but it just sort of organically happened, you know. But he always made a lot of music on his own, so there was definitely tunes that I was playing that there were tunes that we made together, and there were tunes that we made sometimes with like more than one, like myself and him, and like I said, we had our boy Jesta, and then we did some stuff with Sasha Ruckus. We used to work with Dave Whalen. We always had a few engineer guys that would help us, friends that we make music with, and then he would make stuff on his own too. It was never really any like set rules, you know what I mean? It's just a vibe, you know? So definitely, yeah, there's definitely a lot of music that he made on his own, for sure. And some of our releases, you know, one side would have been the two of us together, and one side would be him on his own. It's just whatever worked out, you know, whatever tunes the label wanted, stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
There was no plan. It was just we were just living in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's actually it freaks me out to think that the last song the two of you made together was in 2005. That dates me.
If that, man, it's right into you. I can't. You know, I'm trying to think back. Yeah, because I mean, it got to a point where I wasn't even interested in making music anymore. You know, it was just he was the one who wanted to make it. I was just like, man, I just like DJing. You know. Yeah, I mean, to this day, I get people all the time asking me, well, you should come to the studio with me. And I'm like, what for? Like, you don't need my help. You know what I mean? They're like, no, but she got good ideas. I'm like, well, maybe, but you're good, man. You don't need my help, you know? I never enjoy that. Even when I'd be in the studio on my own, because there's just as much, there's quite often I'd be in there by myself, you know, trying to get my head around the gear and fucking around, I would start something and then he'd come in and we'd finish it together kind of thing, you know? We had a lot of tracks like that, but I never, ever, ever enjoyed engineering at all. And just the thought of it now gives me anxiety, to be honest with you. It's just, it's not an enjoyable process for me. So I got to a point where I was like, you know what, man, like, I understand that I'm supposed to make music as a DJ, but I don't enjoy it, so why am I going to do it? I'm gonna do what I love, which is actually just DJing and finding music, you know? So that's kind of how all that sort of progressed.
And you know what? I sometimes I listen to I guess a good example would be Brocky. Brocky's a DJ, in my opinion, that's made his way because he's friends with lots of producers. He doesn't have to go in the studio and produce. And he may share in your opinion on how monotonous it can be. I agree with you. I'm a very go 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 kind of person. So when I go to lay down lyrics in a studio, I'll be there for 15 20 minutes tops. I do not want to stand or sit in a studio and watch them dissect every little second that is occurring and watch the like 500 layers that they put in there. So I can deeply empathize that there's probably a lot of DJs that don't like producing.
But you see that's that's the fundamental sort of difference. I mean, the people that are the real producers are the ones that do enjoy that process, and I respect that deeply. You know what I mean? Because I've spent years and years and years in the studio and in the studio environment, and I know the kind of work it takes. And if you don't have a true enjoyment of that technical aspect of it, you're not really, like if you're just shacking up with someone to engineer for you because you're quote unquote supposed to produce if you're a DJ, you probably don't have anything good to add to the music anyway. You know what I mean? So the true producers, the true artists, they enjoy that process for them is just as enjoyable as the end result. So those are the real guys. You know what I mean? And I just didn't get any enjoyment out of the process. I enjoyed the end result. I enjoyed the ideas, but I didn't enjoy the process. So therefore, it's not my place. Maybe in the future we'll see. But
No.
I just do what feels right at the time.
Yeah, no, and I get what you mean. You know what? As you were saying it, it kind of makes me think of a ghost writer. When you read a book's been written by so and so, but then you find out they didn't write it. They hired like someone to do all the writing for them. And it's like, well, come on, man, you didn't write this shit.
yeah, exactly. I get that in the terms of if you're writing a book, there has to, some people are fucking, they're cool in public. You can have a very intelligent conversation with them, but they try and fucking type something on Facebook that's like a 4-year-old wrote. You know what I mean? So some people just don't have that. I mean, I get that with books and stuff. If it's like an autobiography or something, you're telling someone's story. But as far as producing that, I mean, you got to enjoy the art. You got to enjoy the process, and it's fundamental to it. So I wasn't enjoying it. So therefore, I pulled myself away from it because what's the point if I'm not having fun?
No, I get you 100%, and I gotta ask this because I can't get a hold of Lance myself. You being as close as you were with him, and him being gone now, do you know where he is and if he's ever planning to come back to the scene?
Yeah, he's out east. He's out east. He's married. He's got 3 kids, and if he's ever ready to, he'll let us know. That's the best answer I can give you. You know what I mean? He's there. If he wanted to be involved, he would be. That's the best answer. Anyone who ever asked me about that, that's the honest truth. If he wanted to be, he'd be here. And if he chooses that he wants to be, he'll be here, and he'll let us know. You know what I mean? And that's the reality of it, bro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I 100%. And if he ever gets the chance to hear this, I hope you come back, Lance. We miss you. Aside from your presence on the microphone, everything you did for our scene, we're better when you're here. And I'd love to talk to him too. So if you do come back, please reach out and let's chat. With that, I guess I want to ask you, from the day that you started to today, what's the largest... Actually, let me ask you this first. What would you say was the pinnacle in our scene from when you started to today? Are we in the pinnacle now? Are we in a state of transition? When was the hottest?
Well, what's your definition of the pinnacle? That's the first, that would define my answer. Because look, obviously the rave scene was as big as its largest point as far as numbers wise, 98, 99, 2000. So is that the pinnacle? We could say that's the pinnacle, sure. But right now, the scene itself is very small numbers-wise, but we have more artists that are making music at a world-class level that's getting recognized. We're seeing guys getting signed and touring the world and giving Toronto sort of a voice production-wise. So I could argue that that's a pinnacle as well, right? So that the question is, what are we defining as the pinnacle? What's the bench? What's the measuring stick, right? So if it's just a numbers game as far as the size of the raves and how many people are into the music casually, then yeah, we got to talk about the late '90s and the early 2000s as being that pinnacle. But if we're talking about purely the artistic aspect of the music, we're in the pinnacle right now because we have the most amount of really high quality producers that have something to say, that are bringing unique interpretation to the music, and it's resonating further than just our city. You know what I mean? Like obviously we have Gremlins, we have Marcus Visionary, obviously Renee LeVice, Bensley as well, NC-17. Slater Grove just got signed to Exit. He has another big release coming on another major label that will be announced soon. Polaris is got some stuff on Hostel, and he's been signed by them. I don't even know if I was supposed to say that, but anyway, too late now. Schematic, Precision, RMS, all these guys, and more to come. There's other guys in the wings. So if we're looking at it in terms of if people from the outside, people that are into drum and bass worldwide are discovering artists and playing those artists the way they would play any of the other artists, and it just so happens those artists are from Toronto, I could argue that's a pinnacle in its own right. So it just depends what we're looking at as the definition of what that pinnacle is.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot of profanity in what you're saying right now. It makes me answer the question myself in a different way. I've always thought of the pinnacle being a self-sustaining industry, like in an economic way. Like when I saw that we had, let's say, 6 different record shops, we had 4 places you could grab clothing, 6 different ticket outlets. Like to me, it wasn't even about how many people I saw at the party. It was how many places could I go to network myself as a junglist in this scene. And yeah, with technology and our society changing, those places aren't capable of keeping up with demand, I guess. So some of the record shops don't necessarily disappear because people don't need the music. It's because they're not buying records anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, based on that set of metrics, then obviously the pinnacle was that time, the '98 to say 2002, when we had, there was a living to be made, so to speak, not just as a DJ, but maybe as a promoter or as a record store owner or as various other, like you said, an industry. There was definitely an industry at that time. So yeah, if that's what we're looking at as the benchmark, then that was definitely the pinnacle.
But I do want to step in on what you did say, which I mean by changing my answer, in that you are so right, and we are in a richness of artists, and I think a lot of people in the last decade, let's say, were trying to pave this path and saying that we don't need people to just show up at our party to pay $10 to get in, get themselves high or drunk, and then leave. We need people to invest in our sound and in our industry. And right now, I do see this as a state of transition and growing to something at the rate we're going that we've never seen before, and much stronger, let's hope, by 2025, let's say, than we saw in 2000 or 2001. Because rather than people like, let's say, you and Marcus spinning your own stuff, you're going to have all these people who've been producing now up until then that are going to be able to release along with whatever armies come up with them. And we should be that much stronger next time the wave comes, if you will. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, we'll see, man. I'll tell you, from a numbers perspective, we're lower than we've been since, we're in some of the lowest numbers we've seen ever right now for drum and bass events across the board. And even the events that you think are big events, the numbers are way, way down. The margins of being profitable are tighter than they've ever been. So, from that aspect, the scene is struggling. But I guess because you could sit in your house and never go to a party ever and, live your life online and be fully connected with what's happening with the music worldwide, be inspired by it and contribute to it that way without ever fucking going out to a party, So it's hard to say. It's hard to say where that's going to go. I think we have a lot. I think that foundation that we have from that sort of late '90s, early 2000s is what planted the seed for what we're seeing now with all these artists, because these are people that grew up in the rave scene, so to speak. and they took that inspiration and they started making music. So is there going to be new people that are getting that as well? Yeah, there is, but I think that they're going to get their inspiration more so from experiencing the music on the internet rather than experiencing the music, 4 a.m. standing in a rave with your friends, fucking 1,000 people on a huge sound system, experiencing the music that way, It's hard to say if we're going to ever get back to that point we had in Toronto. I don't know. I hope we do, but I don't know. It's hard to say. But I think that what's clear is that drum and bass as a music and as a culture is not going anywhere. So it's always going to be there. We survived so many hardships already. It's not going anywhere. I mean, perfect example, like I said, the numbers in Toronto are lower than they've ever been, but yet musically drum and bass is better than it's been in over a decade. So they don't necessarily correlate together. Like one doesn't follow the other. Like if the scene is numbers wise, if the scene is not doing well here, that doesn't mean that the music's going to be shit or people are going to be less productive with it. They're not necessarily on the same path. You know what I mean? So it's hard to say if that's going to translate to having an industry. Like we're never going to have record stores again and stuff like that. Like that's done. It's just really just going to be like, are we going to have good parties with decent numbers and frequency, like weekly events? That's the question. When it remains to be seen. We'll see. It always goes in waves, though, man. You know what I mean? So right now we're in a dip, and the interest it comes and goes from people into the music casually who want to go out here on a system. So it always goes up and down. Right now in a town, what goes down always has to come up. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and one thing I could add, I don't want to go too deep into this argument, but I think promoters need to bring back the all ages jams. If we're going to bank on the future getting anything, we can't rely on us 30 plus people to keep carrying the scene. 30, 40, 50 years old, some people in our, I celebrated, hey, I'll throw Caddy out there. Caddy, man, you're an old man. I remember you, like a guy like him, he's a pioneer of our scene, but how much longer can we rely on Caddy? We need new people.
I hear what you're saying, but the problem, you have to understand that logistically it's not as easy as it was to do those events 15 years ago, right? Like, the liabilities are too high right now, man. Like, it's just...
Here's the thing.
Personally, I'll tell you, like, I've had conversations with promoters and stuff, and I'll tell you right now, me personally, I would not throw an all-ages event. I'm not disputing the need for it in terms of, cultivating younger kids to get into it, but I personally wouldn't put my neck on the line like that right now. The liabilities are too high, especially with the drugs that are out there now that are dropping kids like flies. I would not be putting an event on with of that nature at this time. It's way too risky. And it's sad because, yeah, it is easy. But you have to remember that those same kids that we used to get into the music by, they would come out to all ages waves and they would, catch the bug, so to speak, of experiencing the music the way it's meant to be experienced, which is like, on a big sound system. We can still catch those kids through the internet, which is how we are catching kids now. So it's, I'm not disputing your point as to the need for it, but hey, man, I'm not putting my neck on the line for that. And I know a lot of other promoters that won't either, because it's just too risky, man. It's just too dangerous right now to try that. You know what I mean?
No, I do, and that's...
liabilities are crazy right now. It's hard enough to throw an event, like whether it's a club night or even the harder events, like like what we did with Compound and stuff. It's such a difficult undertaking, and to add the all ages into that, and the liabilities with that, that's scary, man. I don't know.
Well, and the liabilities isn't the one that gets me. I think that promoters are also afraid of forking out all the extra dough, because when you do the all ages, you've got to have a lot more overhead to cover, and that...
Well, yes, that depends on... No, it depends, though. I mean, it depends on where you're doing it, right? That's not necessarily true.
You're right. If you're doing it like you did with Compound, you don't, because then you're just hiring the same amount of paramedics. It's when you rent the bar, and the bar goes, well, if you're going to have kids in here, I can't open my bar, so you got to pay me a bike. So, yeah, you're right. There's definitely an equation.
There's different factors there to do that, but it's the lie. Yes, there's costs with, depending on the venue you use, but dude, my biggest fear is you have a party with, you got 500 kids show up, and these are kids that are new to the concept of going out and raving, and you get an overdose, man. It's this fentanyl shit, man, it's a scary time, man. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
I'm with you, man. And you know what? It's hard for me to speak to it because it's been over 10 years since I've thrown a party. And you're right. We lost, you know, I don't even know how many people last year to fentanyl, over 200 at least. And
yeah, it's you can't. That's what the liability is too high on all ages, man. It's just too dangerous. I don't think that like if you there's no club owner that will touch it. So your next option is to do like the DIY route, i.e. compound example, and then at that point, you know, it's a hard enough time throwing that event legally over 19. You tried doing that, getting those same cooperation from the authorities when it's in all ages. It's next to impossible. I gotta be honest with you.
well, and then you're also taking the liability because then if it's not,
You're 100% taking the liability, but even just letting the event actually happen is, you know, it's tough, man. You know what I mean? In order to do an all ages, it's going to have to be exceptionally DIY, and it's going to have to be DIY to the point where it's very under the radar. You know, and even then, you got to make sure you got a tight ship because you don't want any kids getting hurt. You know what I mean?
I get you, man.
It's sad. It's sad that it's come to that. You know what I mean? Because you know, for me, like you know, I'm not into drugs at all. Period. But you have to accept the realities of what's happening out there. You know.
Exactly that. And I think that's always been, to be honest, man, I grew up as a raver and I was into drugs as a kid. And I always assumed everyone at the party was into drugs. It wasn't until I crossed over to the artist side of things and realized that nobody was into drugs on that side of things, for the most part.
I wouldn't say that. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do know what you mean.
The serious
yeah.
guys, man. Yeah, that's what I mean. For the most part. Yeah, there's guys doing, you know, blow or MDMA and shit. I'm talking about, you know, hardcore drug addiction. Like you talk about kids that the way they take ketamine or
okay, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also fentanyl. I didn't realize that fentanyl is also being used recreationally. It's not just being spiked in people's drugs. It's being used. And
yeah, I mean, I can't keep up with.
Exactly, I can't keep up. What the fuck are you doing?
I don't know, man. It's not my thing. It's not my thing. I can't keep up, but I just know that it's a very real problem. You know.
Exactly. But anyways, okay. This kind of leads. I got two more questions. I'm going to let you go. What is the biggest change you've noticed in the scene since the day you started to today?
Well, obviously the numbers, but I want to say the passion of the people that actually go out to the events, as far as really, really, really being into the music passionately, you know, as opposed to, hey, this is a cool place where I can get away with doing drugs, and the music's kind of cool too. That's kind of the main.
You think that people are getting worse for that now?
You know what, though? To be fair, though, even back then, I mean, everybody was off their face. So I don't know. It's what's the biggest change? I guess obviously the internet really is the biggest change. That changed everything. Changed. Like I said, you could be fully into this music and never set foot in a party ever, and be just completely, you know, just as versed on the music and just as into it and upfront with it as someone who goes out every week. In fact, you'd probably be more knowledgeable about the music if your only interaction with it was on the internet. So the internet is the change, man. It changed everything.
Well,
because obviously that shit didn't exist when we started. It didn't exist at all, and it came in when it came in, and then at first it was kind of a novelty, and then it just became the thing. You know, without the internet, you don't exist as an artist, as a promoter, as anything in this. You know, and it's fucking whack in my opinion, but you have to accept what it is. I mean, at this point, having a conversation about the internet is this. I mean, you're just the old man yelling at the clouds. You know, like it is what it is. This is the reality of our lives for the last 15 years, 10 years at least. You know.
Oh, more than that, man. I remember as a kid going on the breakbeat.co.uk website when they started releasing videos, so I could watch these parties in the UK. And
yeah, I did that too. Yeah.
Right, and we would try and emulate what they did. You know, you wanted to go to a party and you wanted it to look like the one that you watched on breakbeat.co.uk.
Well, but that was no different than, you know, for me, you know, growing up on AWOL tapes and Roast tapes and Psychosis tapes and shit like that. You know, I had tapes, and then the kids that came after me had shit like that. They had drum and bass arena or dogs on acid, you know.
Dogs on acid.
And then, yeah. So it's all it is. It's just the medium with which you connect to the music, you know. So the internet became that medium as opposed to going to the record store and going to raves and buying tapes. You know, that was replaced with, going to the record store and meeting your peers, or going to raves and hanging out with like-minded people and meeting people and actually talking to people face to face. That was replaced with all of that happening on the internet. You know, so that's the biggest change.
Well, and I want to point on one of the things you touched down on about the people who kind of hoard the drum and bass but don't even come out to the parties. I remember a guy having like 6 external hard drives at like 400 gigabytes each, full of drum and bass that he had just hoarded. Like he was on these SoulSeek and Kazaa or whatever, trying to get every drum and bass set. And I don't even think he listened to them. He just wanted to claim that he had, 600 DJ Lush sets. He had more sets of DJ Lush than DJ Lush had of himself. But he never came out to a party. But he could tell you about everyone. You know what I mean? Like he knew who they were, where they came from, all their albums, every song they made, but never came out.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to that, right? Because he's not experiencing the music the way it's. I'm a firm believer in drum and bass music that you're supposed to. It's a culture, but you're supposed to experience it the way it's supposed to be experienced. Like that's why you see a lot of people like. It's the internet culture, like where people will oh, that tune's shit. Well, how do you know that tune's shit? You never heard that tune out. That tune's shit on your fucking iPod. You know what I mean? But when you hear that shit out in a rave, the way it's intended to be heard, that's when it's going to catch you. You know what I mean? So I feel like people who are like that, they're not really, really experiencing this the way it's meant to be experienced. And part of my love for this was instilled for me, just from being in those raves and hearing the music and experiencing it in the moment, in that environment, and that's definitely lost. If your only connection to the music is through the internet, you're not getting the full spectrum. But at the same time, if you're not utilizing the internet as a tool to educate yourself on the music. And I mean, the best part about the internet, if you're into the music, is that you can learn about everything from day dot till now, and there's no excuse. Like, okay, so you weren't there for the jungle days, but there's really no reason why you can't learn about the music because it's all there online, So there's pros and cons to how you use it, but definitely balance is key, like anything.
Like anything. I agree.
Anything.
I agree. Like, even what we're doing right now would not be possible without the internet.
There you go. Exactly. Perfect example.
Right.
Exactly. So. That's the biggest change, man. Overall, the internet just changed. But it changed everything. It's not just in the scene, man. It changed the world. So.
Well, yeah, and once again, not just necessarily for the good, but for the bad as well. Like.
Pros and cons. Pros and cons. Pros and cons. It's a lot easier for me to get my music now than I have to get on a plane in England and go to music house, So, pros and cons.
With that, final question. This is my infamous vault question. If you could put 5 items into a vault that would encapsulate our rave culture, what would the 5 items be?
5 items.
They could be anything, by the way. Like you could put a whole country into the vault if you want. If you think that all of.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's take all of fucking England and just throw that in the vault. Well, you got to do the Flyers. I think the Flyers is always the best representation of especially the early days. Not so much now, but the early days. You get your Flyers right from the beginning, man. From 1989, 90, like the Rare Groove into the Acid House, into the House and Techno, into the Hardcore. Document all of that. I would want a selection of Flyers that documented everything from Malik X and Mark Oliver, Dr. No, moving all the way up. Marcus Delirium, Cyrus, etc., Theory, Empire, all the sort of iconic companies. You got to have representation of that throughout the years up until now, and that would give you an idea of what was happening, who was there, DJ wise, artist wise, who were the promoters. If you start from the very, very beginning and go till now, and how to adequate representation of all that. That would be all the time capsule you'd ever need. And I'd throw some sets in there that from those different eras. I would throw. You've gotta have when Kenny came for Cyrus for the first time for Judgment Day. That was a really important set. You gotta have that in there. You gotta have, maybe some Psychosis tapes in there, like Dr. No, Roughneck, Jungle PhD, those guys. Maybe some, definitely some other Cyrus sets, like, Mystical and Sniper sets, Marcus sets. You gotta have some other iconic sets, okay. When Brian and Ronnie Size came from Utopia, that was an important set. Gotta have that in there. Obviously, the Shy Effects on the radio with Fearless and Skibba, you need that. I'm sure everybody says that one, but that one's important. Whatever. Throw one of my sets in there. Throw one of Jay's sets in there. Cover all the bases. And then, right up till now, man. Throw all the guys all the new guys now, man. You gotta throw them in there as well.
Definitely.
That would give you a proper representation. Other than that, maybe some of the clubs and some of the venues, so you could have, 23 off, that's very important. You got to put that in there. You got to put the tunnel in there. You got to put factory in there.
Do you remember the spot that used to be over at Keel and St. Clair in the old pig slaughterhouse?
Yeah, that was Guns Road. That was Cyrus did a couple parties. Well, Cyrus did, I think, 2 parties there. A bunch of other people did raves there back in the day. I think that was E-Space.
E-Space, that's it. Thank you. E-Space. Yeah. And you know what? If I could tell you just a quick funny story. I was going in to record there once, and one of the flyers, like I was there probably in 2000, and there was an old flyer from a rave from years ago that said Cyrus rules, and then it had 9 to 10, but all the DJ names had rubbed out, but you could see the 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12.
The 9 to 10, 10 to 11, that would be me. I played a bunch of raves there, man. Yeah, there's an elevator from the floor that goes up. I guess I can't remember. That's all a blur, but yeah, so there you go. There's a good venue to put in. Cinespace, absolutely very important to put that in there. Obviously, government, docks, another. Just the places where like the most sort of iconic raves were happening in the clubs. Definitely Beat Junkie is important. You got to put Milano in there.
I heard Kaboom. Somebody, because Mach 1 was thrown at Kaboom apparently, and then that started a whole.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Like, Kaboom, there was a bunch of raves. It's just like now, man. A venue comes sort of on the radar, and then all the promoters fucking swoop down on it, and then you have a whole bunch of parties there until that venue's just fucking dead out. That happens to this day, man. That happens to this fucking day. Dude, I'm going to play at Baseline in like 2 hours. How many fucking parties are there? That's just the venue right now. You know what I mean? It's no different. So yeah, you gotta have some of those iconic venues like that I mentioned, especially the early ones like 23 Hop and Factory, and even like Cameron House, because that's where like the acid house scene kind of started, the rare group scene. And then you gotta have Turbo, you gotta have System, you gotta have Industry, you gotta have Beat Junkie is important. A lot of people overlook the Beat Junkie era. That was really important era for drum and bass in Toronto. Milano's for sure.
Milano's, you know what? If I could just say, Milano's was once the spot where you knew if you missed the party on Saturday, it was okay, because for $5 you were going to catch everyone at Milano's on the Sunday.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you're talking about an industry. I mean, that represents that time. I mean, at that time, dude, I was DJing. Like I used to DJ on Monday nights. Caddy used to do a party at Comfort Zone, which is Comfort Zone. Incidentally, we should throw in the time capsule. But yeah, I used to play on Monday. I used to play on Sunday. I used to play Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like there was stuff happening. So that's when you talk about an industry. That's what we had then. But Milano was a good period. It's funny with Milano because that was intended to be a liquid night. Very early on in the game, like I remember the first few Sundays, maybe the first month and a half, it was empty. It was me playing liquid to nobody, to slip and slide and, just our friends. You know what I mean? And then I can't remember if it was a case of that they brought somebody in, and that's what kick-started it or if it was off the back of us. I honestly can't remember, but it just became something that was supposed to be this sort of liquid night where we were pushing the more mellow side of music, just became a full-on rave, no different than Friday and Saturday. And I guess that's how it got big. And obviously bringing the guys in, and the guys would come there and they wouldn't hold back. They were playing the same way they were playing on Saturday night. So it just became a Sunday night rave, you know what I mean? And I guess that's how it got so big. People, the ravers spoke, you know, they say, yo, we don't want to chin scratch intelligent drum and bass night. We want to rave it out. So that's what happened, and that's how it was successful.
And that was once again also about unity, because nowadays a guy will say, well, nobody will say, but nobody's working together enough to do it, because if you pay for someone's flight, the last thing you want him doing is taking other bookings while he's here. So you have to have a unification between the different promoters that plan to do something like that.
Yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of guys that come through and play church. The real reason why you don't see guys doing that as much is mainly because 90% of the guys that come here are on a tour, so it's one night in, one night out, right? But generally, when the guys available here on the Sunday, James gets them down to church. They work. I mean, obviously, what you're talking about as far as, you know, you have to cut a deal with the promoter who brought him in, and that's what they do. But, you know, Nasalad, for example, usually their events, they'll usually have one or two of the guys will stay over and do church. So it's not necessarily true that people are working together. It's just more so the actual logistics of these guys are coming in on a tour and they're in and out. So they used to come in and they would stay for the week, you know, so you could have them at these other places. But now they're just, you know, we're just a stop on the mortgage loan for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess the nostalgia's worn off.
That's really what it boils down to. But like pretty much anybody who's been here in the last, I'd say 2 years or so, anyone who's been here in the last 2 years that's played on a Friday or Saturday night and still here on a Sunday, they pretty much did play at church. You know? So, but it was just really just had to do with back then. Those guys were coming in direct. It wasn't a tour. They were coming in to play for Cyrus, and they were here for the week. You know? It's just a different time then. You know, it's just that the industry worldwide was just different then. That's really what it boiled down to as far as why we were getting all those guys to come in and play at Milano. You know?
Well, that's awesome.
That's all it was.
Okay, so I think we've got three things really. We've got flyers, we've got tapes, and we've got clubs.
Yeah. So
So
I gotta have 5.
5 things is what we got. 2 more things to go.
I mean, a fucking club is a lot of fucking square footage, man, to fit in the time capsules. I mean, I gave you like 5 or 6 clubs. Well, then the actual, like, the people themselves, man. Like, the
Ravers.
DJs themselves.
The ravers.
Well, yeah. Okay. So what, you want to pick your one fucking gold star raver from each fucking generation and throw them in the time capsule? I don't know.
No, I love it. We have to have ravers. If we're gonna have a time capsule.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sure. I don't know who to nominate for that, but you tell me.
I can't think of just.
For me, it would be, yeah. And then I guess the record stores. You gotta have the record stores in there. So
Okay.
the first choice obviously is Boogie Record. I mean, that goes without saying. And then it was Eastern Bloc. But it was also for a short period of time there was Beeswax, which was Jungle PhD and Medicine Muffins Shop. It was a lot. That's kind of been lost to history because it was so long ago and it was a short period of time. So very few of us that kind of remember it. But they definitely were a very important record store in like 93, 94.
Oh, okay.
So I would put Beeswax, so Play Record, Eastern Bloc, Beeswax, and then you had, there was The Pit, there was To The Beat, you have to throw those in there, and it was also, it was originally called Star Sound, but then it became Tracks, so that record store would have to be in there. Yeah, the record stores were key, man.
You know what
You have to have like Ecstatic. Ecstatic was so important back then because this was pre-internet. So Ecstatic was the meeting place. That's where you went and you got your flyers and you got your mixtapes, and that was your chat room of the day or your Facebook of the day. You know what I mean? So Ecstatic was very important to the development of this thing. So you got to put Ecstatic and I guess Melon as well. You got to put those in there.
I agree.
I would say.
I agree fully. And I think out of I think you're the 14th person I'm interviewing, and all 14 of you have somehow mentioned DJ Dominic, because I believe Ecstatic was Dominic's place where I got my
No,
first.
that wasn't. No. Static wasn't Dominic's place. Static was this guy, Captain V Mental, started that. He was the guy who started Pleasure Force, and then later on he gave it to one of his relatives. I don't know, his brother-in-law or something. This guy Eamon, he took it over, and then after Eamon, it shut down. But no, Dominic just like worked there or whatever. I don't even know if he worked. Did Dominic even work at Ecstatic? I don't remember that.
I think he did.
At Eastern Bloc for a bit.
I think he, if I'm not mistaken,
Maybe he did.
I think he
I
did.
don't remember Demonic at Ecstatic. I remember Demonic at Eastern Bloc. But,
Not demonic,
yeah, I don't know.
not demonic. Dominic.
No, sorry, Dominic. I meant Dominic.
Okay.
Apologies.
And you could be right. I could be.
Demonic, by the way.
I could be messing it up.
No, I might be wrong. I just don't remember. But it was Ecstatic. But you said Ecstatic was his. I'm just correcting you on that.
Gotcha.
Ecstatic was absolutely not Dominic's shop. Ecstatic belonged to this guy, Captain V Mental, who was the one of three guys that started Pleasure Force. And he's that's one of the kind of guys that you would have to put in. Well, Ecstatic goes in the time capsule, but Pleasure Force was a very important company back then. And they were like the big, before Cyrus, it was Pleasure Force. You know what I mean? They were the big company. That's the company that brought Goldie for the first time, Weapons Crew. That they were very important. Them, Psychosis, Infinity, Chemistry, Nitrous, all those original rave companies. I mean, they'd be represented through the flyers, but they would have to go in there because that's the foundation that this shit is built on. Delirium, of course, we have a drum and bass scene because of Delirium. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you got to put those in the box, man. The key promoters and also the promoters that because really those aren't drum. That was all hardcore, and we're talking actual drum and bass. Cyrus, and then Theory, Empire was very, very important. I think the contribution of Empire can't be overlooked because there was a period there where they were the top dogs, just like Theory also. So there was kind of a torch that was kind of passed, from Pleasure Force, Cyrus to after Cyrus was kind of I'd say it was Empire, and then after Empire was Theory. You know what I mean?
Well,
So sort of like the really big companies, like really like on the large scale drum and bass companies. You know what I mean? So all those would have to be in that box for sure.
and one that I gotta say, like, is when you mention all the companies you're mentioning, you guys are a lot of a clique. Like you mentioned somewhat earlier in my interview when you talked about how you got to know the Heartlight guys and your crew and one other crew, and there were the three crews. And when you look at how things went in the evolution of what you're describing of Cyrus and Theory and Dose and all those guys, the separate crew to me is the Liquid Adrenaline guys. They were their own.
There was another. I mean, there was a definite Liquid Adrenaline was one, and there was Next Junction, and there was as far as drum and bass was concerned, there was a whole bunch of companies that were definitely they were just they built their own. They were inspired by what the earlier raves that came before them, and they built their own. I mean, Liquid Adrenaline was they were like a juice bar. It started as a juice bar at the early raves. It used to be like you get your flyer for Delirium or for Psychosis, and it'd be like Smart Bar by Liquid Adrenaline, and they used to sell like I don't even fucking know what it was, like the equivalent of Red Bull before Red Bull existed.
Really?
And then from there, that's what Liquid Adrenaline was. That's why it's called Liquid Adrenaline.
Makes sense.
They were doing like they used to call, because remember the early raves there was no alcohol at all, right? It was the early raves, like up until like the whole '90s. There was no you weren't in clubs. They were raves. They were unlicensed, and the only way they could throw those parties without getting shut down was by not having any alcohol at all, because the cops would come and they can't shut you down for alcohol because you're not in an infraction, right? So they used to have what was called smart bars. They called them smart bars, and it was just they were selling like juice and like smoothies and shit like that. And they'd put in like fucking protein powder and I don't know, caffeine, like shit to keep you awake, like give you energy. You know what I mean? So that's what Liquid Adrenaline was. They became like a branded smart bar, and they were doing all the raves. Like I can't remember the raves. I'm pretty sure they did like Atlantis and Nitrous and all that. And Psychosis and Delirium. I mean, you've got to look. If you go back and look at the flyers, you'll see it was this Smart Bar by Liquid Adrenaline. And then at some point they started. I don't remember when their first event was. It must have been late '90s. But I remember when they started throwing the parties, they had those like laminated flyers, the really colorful flyers,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously like their DJ lineups were different than like say Cyrus and that. So they stood out and they had their own following. And the same went for Next Junction, and the same went for Big Bud. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier about that heyday where there was a big rave every Saturday night. Was like a big rave with thousands of people, like every single Saturday night. You know what I mean? And then like once a month or once every 6 weeks there'd be an even bigger rave, which would be your Cyrus, your Life Force kind of rave, right? But then every week in between would be Big Bud, Next Junction, Liquid Adrenaline, some other company that only threw a couple parties and disappeared. That was the industry, so to speak. And also part of that if we're going to touch on it, remember all these parties started at 10 p.m. and they went till fucking almost 10 a.m. So that's a lot of time to have a lot of DJs on the lineups, right? So as opposed to now where it's like, yeah, we're bringing in whichever guy from England, whatever, and he's going to play fucking 12 to 2, and then we have an opening DJ and a closing DJ, and that's it. Whereas back then, there's 20 DJs on the lineup, or 10 DJs on the lineup, and everybody, so you'd be playing, someone will call you, yeah, Lush, you're playing 4 to 5 a.m. You're like, fucking dope, that's a great time slot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that was prime time, because the parties were going later. So that heyday was all encompassing all that, right? All those different event companies with big parties that were well attended and were more than just bar hours.
I totally get it. And
we're going back and forth on topics, but it's all interchangeable.
No, and I can appreciate what you're saying. To add on to that, the stock system that comes with the clubs nowadays is also bullshit. Like, you used to leave a party, like you say, after 12 hours of partying sometimes, and you could still hear and feel the music even hours after you left. A car would drive by and it would sound like drum and bass as it drove by you, because you were still just ringing. And you don't get that with the sound we're dealing with these days.
We try. That's why we're doing a lot of events. Not necessarily me personally, but other people, where it's where the sound system is paramount to the event. Whether it's dub rock or 40 hertz or Iron Lung, it's important to us, man. That's why that was why we did Compound, and that's why guys like 40 hertz do their parties. It's bringing back that feeling, or trying to anyway.
Well, yeah, and big up to them, like Massive and Marcus Brown for what they're doing, and the rest of the guys, Drew. I hate naming names because I always forget a name, so I'm not going to name names. But anyways, Mr. Lush, we said 20 minutes. It's been over an hour, and I really thank you for talking to me. You've got a gig tonight, so go break a leg, and I hope you'll talk to me again. When I get my setup improved, I want to have everyone come back, so would you talk to me again in the near future?
No, I can shoot the shit and tell stories for days, bro. We can do this anytime.
Awesome. That's what I love to hear.
Once you get me going, you just got to get through the door. Once you're through the door, we just go.
That's what I like.
No problem.
Awesome.
Yeah, we can do that. Man. That's no problem.
All right. Well, go break a leg, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, bro.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Oh, hold on. One last thing. Where can we hear your music? Can you leave me with a link so I can post it below when I post this video? But just tell the listeners where they can hear DJ Lush if they want to hear you right now.
Well, like sets and stuff? Mixcloud, SoundCloud?
Exactly, yeah. So you have a Mixcloud, you have a SoundCloud, do you have both?
Yeah, both of them are DJ Lush Toronto.
Okay.
SoundCloud or Mixcloud, and obviously on Facebook, whatever, DJ Lush on Facebook. You can, the links to all my shit is there. And, I need to definitely get more active with uploading my sets and stuff, because I'm just fucking stupid like that. But yeah, catch me there. But the best place to catch me, man, catch me in the clubs, man. You got to catch it in real time.
That's it.
And it's an experience. It's an experience. You want to hear me play? Come to the party. That's where you get the real experience.
I hear you, man. All right, well, we will catch you at the club, but until then, you have a good evening, sir.
You too, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for talking. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
There he is, DJ Lush. Thanks, man, for doing that. And yeah, like I say, he actually did catch me on my way out, saying he was available to chat right now. So I decided to flip back around and talk to Mr. Lush, which I'm glad I did. That's, I think, the longest chat I've had, over an hour there. And I hope we had a good dialogue. I thought it felt very well. And yeah, I learned some stuff there. That's another thing I'm loving about this. Every time I talk to one of these guys, I learn something new. I hope to get the Liquid Adrenaline crew on this, and I get to talk to them and hear their side of their own story. It was cool to learn a little bit about El Natural. Like I said, if you ever do hear this video, please, man, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you and share your story with our family. Anyways, as always, guys, thanks for tuning in. Till next time, peace out.